My mom said coldly, "We don't sit with kids like you." Everyone laughed. I shrugged, took my little daughter's hand and left. Dad texted, "Payment tomorrow, right?" I replied, "I don't help parents like you." The next day I cut off every payment. And then, my mom leaned over and silently shaped the words, "We don't sit with kids like that." And people around her started laughing like it was nothing. I didn't argue or say a word, I just shrugged, took my little girl's hand, and walked us straight out the door. Later that night my dad texted me, "Payment tomorrow, right?" And I wrote back, "I don't help parents like you." The next day I cut off every single payment without hesitation. I was furious at my mother for saying it, but I was just as mad at my father for sitting there and letting it slide like always. That had been the pattern my whole life, her cruel mouth and his quiet approval. Sometimes he'd nod, sometimes he'd laugh, sometimes he'd act like he didn't hear a thing. But he never once stepped in, never defended me or my daughter. It was my brother Mark's 34th birthday, and like always he invited everyone, pretending our family wasn't barely held together by denial and duct tape. He wanted things to feel normal, and for him I was willing to play along. I showed up with a gift, a genuinely nice one, and I dressed my daughter carefully. She wore a pink dress with puffy sleeves and tiny strawberries stitched all over it, and she brushed her hair twice because she said Grandma liked it neat, which almost crushed me all by itself. When we walked into the house, for just a moment it felt almost warm and familiar. The air smelled like baked ziti and cake. Music played softly from the living room speakers, and Mark's kids ran around in their socks laughing. His wife waved at me the same way she always did, tired but kind, like she was holding everything together by willpower alone. My daughter squeezed my hand and asked if she could give Uncle Mark her drawing, a picture she made of him as a superhero, and I told her yes because I always tell her yes. We stepped further inside and that's when I saw my mother at the table, already drinking white wine like it was water. She looked up and her eyes went straight to my daughter and then to me. Her face didn't change at all. She leaned toward my dad and said something I couldn't hear, but I watched her mouth the words slowly and clearly, "We don't sit with kids like that." She didn't even bother to look away when she noticed me watching, like it wasn't worth hiding. My dad glanced at her, then at me and let out a short, sharp laugh, the kind people make when someone tells a nasty joke they don't want to challenge. A few others laughed too, probably just reacting to the sound without knowing what was said, but it didn't matter. My daughter was still smiling, holding her drawing tightly. I bent down and whispered that we had to go, and she looked confused but nodded because she always nods and I think she's already learned to accept things no kid ever should. As we headed out, Mark caught us in the driveway, clearly panicking, asking what happened and why we were leaving so suddenly. I told him I didn't want to cause a scene and that it was his day, and I asked him not to fight with them, not today. He glanced past me toward the front window, and I could tell he had an idea of why, but he didn't push me. When we got home I heated up leftover pasta for my daughter, and she ate quietly while she drew, then asked if Grandma didn't like her picture. I told her it had nothing to do with the drawing, and she nodded again before going to her room without saying anything else. At 10:06 that night my dad texted, "Payment tomorrow, right?" And that was all, no asking if we were okay, no mention of dinner, no pretending anymore, just a reminder that I was their retirement plan. I stared at the screen for a long time before finally replying, "I don't help parents like you." He never answered. The next morning I logged into every account I had connected to them and shut it all down, stopping every transfer, canceling every bill, turning off the car insurance autopay I'd been covering, blocking the pharmacy payments for their meds, cutting every single thread I'd been using to hold their lives together, all gone in 10 minutes. They didn't call or text, but I knew they noticed, and I knew this wasn't over because my parents never accept silence as the final word. They stayed quiet the first day and the second, but then Mark called and told me Mom was pacing the house like a storm and Dad was slamming cabinets. He said he tried to talk to them and asked why they couldn't just be kind for once, and I told him not to bother and that I didn't need him fixing it. Then he asked something that stuck with me, asking how long I planned to keep forgiving them, and I didn't have an answer, so I just asked how his kids were doing. By the end of the week my parents realized I wasn't bluffing when the pharmacy called me directly about a declined card. That's when my dad left a voicemail pretending he had no idea what happened, talking about glitches and payments not going through. And the next day my mom sent a text packed with guilt and demands, saying I was wrong for taking things out on them after all they'd done to raise me right, claiming I was hurting them for no reason. She never mentioned what she said at the party, never apologized, never even acknowledged it like it never happened, and I was imagining things like I was the problem and I didn't reply. A week later Mark came by saying he just wanted to talk, and he brought a huge bag of markers and glitter pens for my daughter, letting her sit beside him on the couch while he played videos for her on his phone, because she adored him and always had. He never said the wrong thing around her, never made her feel like she was too much. After a while he glanced out the window and quietly asked if that was their car. And when I stood up and looked, it was. They hadn't called or warned me, they'd just seen his car and decided to show up. I didn't open the door, but I didn't need to because my mom let herself in like it was still her house, with my dad behind her already complaining about my attitude and how disrespectful I'd become. The second they noticed Mark, their tone shifted completely because of course it did. They adored him, always had, their golden child, tall, athletic, clean-cut, successful with a perfect family and nothing soft or vulnerable for them to pick apart. And I had never been him. They never missed a chance to remind me either, like it was their favorite habit. The fight kicked off before I even had the chance to open my mouth. My mom went straight in, accusing me of turning my daughter into some kind of victim just to get sympathy. My dad followed up by asking how long I planned to punish them for being old-fashioned, like that explained everything. Then Mark raised his voice, which honestly shocked me because he never did that, not once in his life until now. He told them to stop, told them to listen, told them they couldn't keep treating people like trash and still expect help whenever they needed it. They turned on him fast, but not in a loud way, not with yelling, just the usual disappointed head shakes, the guilt trips, the same tired speech about how they gave him everything. Mark got louder. I let him. By then my daughter had already gone to her room and shut the door. Eventually he told them to leave, said they weren't welcome back until they apologized. My mom stared at him like he'd slapped her across the face, and my dad didn't argue, he just followed her out. Should have felt like a win, but it didn't. It felt like something had cracked open, and we were all just standing there waiting to see what would come spilling out. 3 days later Mark called again, sounding worn down. He said our parents had dropped off gifts for his kids, toys, clothes, even brand new tablets, but they left nothing for my daughter, not even a card or some cheap stuffed animal. He paused, then said he'd already bought her presents because he knew they wouldn't. Then he told me something I didn't expect, that he was taking back the car he'd given them 2 months earlier, the one they bragged about like they bought it themselves. He said he was calling them that night and telling them it was over, that until they apologized they didn't get to keep the benefits of being family. I didn't say anything, didn't cry, didn't thank him, I just sat there feeling the balance shift, knowing this wasn't really about the car anymore. This was the start of something they weren't prepared for, even though I was. My daughter didn't ask for much that Christmas, just a sketchbook with thick pages and a good set of markers. And she even said she didn't care if it was wrapped. She just wanted paper that wouldn't bleed through. I got her that and a few small extras, sloth socks, a soft hoodie in her favorite purple, and a tiny cat-shaped desk lamp, none of it fancy, but she lit up like I'd handed her something priceless. We planned to spend the day at home, just the two of us, but Mark insisted we come over, saying it wouldn't feel right without us, and the kids kept asking about their cousin. I hesitated because I knew our parents would be there, but he promised he'd handle it if anything went wrong, so I agreed. We arrived early, my daughter ran off with her cousins right away, and I helped Mark's wife finish sides in the kitchen, and for a little while it felt good, normal, even like we actually belonged. When our parents showed up they made a show of it. Loud voices, fake cheer, dragging in huge red and gold gift bags tied with ribbons. I watched them hand presents to Mark's boys, toys, clothes, envelopes stuffed with cash, even a drone, a full-on drone for a 10-year-old. And for my daughter, nothing. She stood near the tree smiling, waiting, her eyes darting from my mom's hands to the bags and down to the floor, over and over, waiting for her turn that never came. My mom glanced at her once and then looked away like she wasn't even there. And my dad cracked a joke about how some kids didn't need more junk since it's not like they're active anyway. And I don't think anyone laughed, but I did hear my daughter swallow that tiny quiet sound. She went upstairs by herself without a word, picked up her sketchbook and disappeared. Mark noticed immediately, stood up with a ribbon still in his hand and asked our mom straight out where her gift was. She looked offended, said she didn't think we'd be there, said she thought Gloria was trying to separate the family again, and then without hesitation, said it wasn't her job to cater to a child who clearly had health issues, those exact words. That was the moment everything stopped. Mark set the ribbon down, went to the coat closet, grabbed his jacket and keys, And when they asked where he was going, he calmly said he was getting the car back. My dad scoffed. My mom started talking fast about overreactions and everything they'd done for us and how I was turning everyone against them. And when she said the car was a gift, Mark looked at her and said not anymore. They stood there stunned like the power had been cut. Then he walked out. After they left, I went upstairs and found my daughter sitting on her bed drawing with a thick red marker. A house with one window and a closed door. No people anywhere. I sat beside her and she didn't look up, just asked if Grandma and Grandpa forgot her, and I said no. Then she asked if they didn't like her and I couldn't answer because the truth was worse. They were trying to erase her, punishing her for not being thin and quiet and neat, not being someone they could show off at church or brag about at dinner, not being someone who didn't look like me or come from me. Later that night, Mark came back, exhausted but steady, handed me the keys and said they wouldn't call to apologize, only to ask for it back, and he was right. The next morning at 9:12 my mom called, didn't ask how we were or how my daughter was doing. Went straight into saying Mark was unreasonable and I needed to talk to him. That they needed the car and it was cruel to take it during the holidays. Never once mentioning the missing gift or saying she regretted anything. I let her talk and then I hung up without a word, because in that moment I understood something clearly for the first time. This was never a misunderstanding. This wasn't confusion or crossed wires, this was exactly who they were. And I finally understood I wasn't willing to keep being who they needed me to be anymore. I honestly thought taking the car back would be the last straw, that they'd sulk, make a couple angry calls, then disappear into silence until the next round of guilt, because that was always their pattern: break things, wait it out, then come back pretending nothing happened. But instead of vanishing, they changed strategy. 3 days after Christmas, when the cold had settled in and everything felt quiet and still, my daughter sat at the kitchen table repainting old drawings, turning her mistakes into flowers like she always did. And I was halfway through my coffee when the doorbell rang at 7:42 in the morning. I wasn't expecting anyone, and nobody decent shows up before 8 unless it's an emergency or they're trying to make a point. And sure enough, it was my mother standing on the porch holding a thick white envelope and wearing that same coat she always put on when she wanted to look important. I opened the door because curiosity has always been my weakness, and I needed to know what she thought this moment was supposed to be. She didn't say hello or ask to come inside, just looked tired but determined, like someone about to argue their way out of a ticket, and held out the envelope saying, "It's for January, we want the car back." I didn't move, just stared at her hand, and she pushed the envelope closer before adding that if that's what it took, they'd even apologize. Not an apology, just the concept of one, like saying sorry was a transaction they could complete and move on from. I heard my daughter's footsteps behind me, and when she peeked around and saw my mother, she gave a small uncertain wave, and my mother didn't wave back, so I quietly closed the door without saying a word. She didn't knock again, and the envelope stayed on the porch untouched while I made breakfast, got my daughter dressed, and took her for a walk without mentioning any of it. Around noon I told my brother Mark they'd shown up, and he groaned like he'd been expecting it, then told me something I hadn't known, that a week before Christmas our parents had tried to put me back in their will, claiming they wanted to do the right thing and make it up to me, and Mark told them not to bother unless they apologized for real, not for money or appearances, and they refused, choosing instead to try buying their way back with guilt and envelopes. It made a sick kind of sense because they assumed I cared about money and legacy the way they did, never realizing I'd been giving them $2,000 a month not out of generosity but because they trained me to believe I owed them, because guilt always outweighed logic in our family until it didn't anymore. 2 mornings later my phone buzzed with a photo from my dad showing the car parked outside a mechanic's shop and a caption underneath saying, "Hope your brother's ready to pay for this. Not our fault," with no explanation, just blame tossed like a burden they didn't want to hold. The real twist came that afternoon when I was sweeping the porch and my daughter stepped outside holding the envelope she'd found tucked behind a flower pot like it was meant to be taken quietly later, and when I opened it expecting cash or demands, it turned out to be a letter, not from my parents but from my aunt, my mother's older sister, someone I hadn't heard from in almost 9 years. She wrote that she'd heard what happened through a cousin who'd been at the party, that she was sorry, that she wished she'd reached out sooner, and that when they were growing up my mother treated her the same way, tearing her down, isolating her, controlling everything, and she didn't want me to think I was alone in it because I wasn't. At the end she left her phone number and said if I ever wanted to talk or if my daughter ever wanted to visit, she'd love that, and I read the letter 3 times before folding it and putting it in a drawer. That night after my daughter fell asleep, I sat on the couch staring at the door, and for the first time no one was knocking, no one was demanding anything, And it hit me that the silence felt good, not empty but free. New Year's passed without a word from them. No calls, no messages, not even one of my mom's usual guilt-wrapped holiday texts. Just quiet. And while part of me felt peace, another part knew better because silence from them was never surrender, it was planning. 2 weeks later my daughter got invited to her first sleepover for Mark's youngest turning 7, and she counted the days like it was Christmas, packed early, picked her outfit a week ahead, wrapped a drawing in tissue paper with a candy cane taped to it, and hummed the whole drive over. We arrived early and I stayed for lunch while Mark grilled chicken and vegetables and hot cider simmered on the stove, and for a moment it felt simple and normal enough that I let myself enjoy it, right until I heard tires crunch in the driveway. I didn't need to look to know. And when Mark's wife peeked through the curtain and sighed saying great, I stayed seated just like Mark did while my parents walked in with that same fake cheer they always used when they wanted something. They carried bags, lots of them, clearly labeled and personalized, and handed toys and envelopes to Mark's boys, books to his youngest daughter, even a trendy kid's smartwatch, and for my daughter there was nothing at all, no card, no small gift, not even a piece of chocolate. She was upstairs in her cousin's room and didn't see any of it happen, but I did, and so did Mark. He didn't blow up this time or raise his voice, he just looked straight at them and asked, calm and simple, why? My mother didn't even hesitate. She said they weren't sure my daughter would be there, and didn't know if she was invited. My dad jumped in right after and said it was probably for the best anyway, that she didn't need more things, she needed structure and routine. Then he looked at me and said, you know what I mean? Mark stood up slowly, not angry or loud, just steady, and told them they needed to leave right now. My mom looked offended like she was being disrespected in her own house even though it wasn't her house at all, and she opened her mouth to lecture us, but Mark cut her off and said no, you don't get to come here with gifts for everyone but my niece and pretend that isn't cruel, and you don't get to hurt my sister under my roof. My dad muttered something under his breath that I didn't catch but Mark did, and he turned to him and said, get out, both of you. And they did, no scene, no dramatic speech, just walked out with their empty gift bags and got into their car. And it wasn't loud or flashy but it felt final. Mark sat back down like nothing had happened, handed me a fork, and asked if I wanted more salad, and he didn't apologize because he didn't need to, that moment said everything. I stayed another hour, then went upstairs to say goodbye to my daughter, and she gave me a sleepy hug and asked if I'd come early the next morning, and I promised I would. On the drive home the silence felt heavier than usual, and the next evening after I picked her up and we were heading back, she stared out the window for a long time before quietly asking why doesn't anyone love me, not sad or dramatic, just honest like she was trying to solve it herself. I froze because I wanted to give her a neat hopeful answer about people being confused or not knowing how to show love, but I couldn't lie anymore and she deserved better than that, so I pulled into a gas station parking lot with flickering lights and gum stains on the curb and told her the truth, that some people only love what they can control and shape, that some people only care when you fit what they want, and that isn't love, it's conditions, and that she wasn't a project or a problem. She was a person and a good one. She didn't cry. She just nodded and stared at the dashboard and said they make me feel like I don't exist. And I didn't have words for that, so I held her hand until we were ready to keep driving. That night I didn't sleep. I reread the letter from my aunt that I'd left in the drawer and stared at her number, wondering if calling her would open something dangerous or something necessary, but I knew one thing for sure. The people who made my daughter question if she was lovable didn't get another chance, not after that. I used to feel guilty for cutting them off, but now I feel guilty for waiting so long. The first sign it wasn't over didn't come as a call or a knock, but as a screenshot from my parents' neighbor Mrs. Klein, a well-meaning gossip in her 70s, showing my mother's Facebook post with white cursive over a candle saying sometimes bridges burn because they were never meant to carry you forward, with comments full of sympathy and praise about what a wonderful mother she was, and her replying with vague lines about heartbreak and peace and trusting God. All of it just her trying to rewrite the story before anyone asked why her kids stopped talking to her. A few days later they showed up at my house without warning while I was unloading groceries, my daughter upstairs painting with music on, and I stepped outside so they couldn't drag her into it. My dad did the talking while my mom stood behind him with her arms crossed pretending to be supportive instead of instigating, saying they wanted to talk, that they missed us, especially my daughter, that they were ready to move forward, and then he said they were willing to apologize, not that they were sorry or wrong, just another offer like a transaction. Then my mom added that we'd all made mistakes and shouldn't let pride tear apart the only family we had, and casually suggested we talk about getting the car back now that things were calming down. And there it was, the real reason they were there. Something inside me snapped, not anger or sadness, just weightlifting. And I told them I wasn't interested in starting over. There would be no more contact and this was done. My dad frowned like he couldn't believe I meant it. My mom said I'd regret it someday when they were gone. And I told her I already regretted wasting so much time trying to fix something that was never whole. Then I went inside and closed the door. They didn't knock again, and after that they went quiet for real, and even I think they knew it was different. That month I canceled the last bills and auto payments and freed up almost $2,000 a month, and for the first time asked what my daughter and I could do with that space, so we bought her better art supplies, signed her up for a weekend pottery class, and repainted her room pale green with fake vines on the windows and a bed shaped like a little house. One night while she organized her markers she asked if they were gone now, and when I said yes she smiled and said good, not angry or sad, just finished. That weekend she made a small lopsided purple clay pendant with her fingerprint pressed into it and gave it to me saying I should wear it so I don't forget I'm hers, and I haven't taken it off since, and sometimes late at night when I think about how much I used to bend myself for people who only saw me as useful, not human, I touch that little pendant and remember what it feels like to belong to someone who loves without conditions. I didn't lose a family, I just stopped paying rent in someone else's version of love.